On this episode of the WildFed podcast.
We've been on bridges where there's like a 30 or 40 foot boat next to us in our little tiny boat, and we're out fishing them. You don't need much to do it. You just have to do it.
Hunters and foragers and anglers, we form relationships not just with individual species of animals, but with these environments. If something happens to our beaver pond, I'm going to be pissed.
There's a strange thing where you go to the finest dining restaurants in the world and you see a lot of foraged mushrooms, foraged plants, game meats, line-caught fish, all this stuff. That's considered the highest end cuisine, but then when you go amongst the hunter-fisher world, that stuff just gets like cream cheese, jalapenos, and bacon.
There's been, I think, a huge disconnect. The food that had a little more story to it always seemed to be the best.
If the only thing you're looking for is a full stomach, why bother with food? They sell Soylent now.
Episode number 37 of the WildFed podcast, Elevated Wild, with Wade Truong and Rachel Owen, is brought to you by Surthrival. Surthrival was built on the uncommon but powerful premise of self-health care, the idea that ultimately it's you who's responsible for your own health. Never before has it been more clear. While governments, health agencies, and medical professionals scramble to create policies and treatments for the masses, the wise amongst us have been busy building the strongest, healthiest, and most adaptable versions of ourselves that we can. Surthrival specializes in time-tested immuno and adaptogenic formulas for modern humans. You've heard me talk about Surthrival's flagship product, colostrum. It's been shown in peer-reviewed science to be 3 times more effective against flu than vaccines. A recent article on the University of Arizona's Center for Integrative Medicine's website notes that colostrum reduces 2 key cytokines involved in the symptoms of COVID-19. And while it's still too early to know what role colostrum might play in treating COVID, they write with a high-quality product, there's very low risk associated with bovine colostrum. Surthrival's colostrum is the highest grade on the market today, and Surthrival has extended its colostrum sale for an extra 2 days. All colostrum products at Surthrival are 20% off until Thursday, July 9th with the coupon code WEAREIMMUNE. That's spelled WERIMMUNE. Again, it's we, the letter R, immune, and it gets you 20% off all colostrum products. Again, the coupon code is WEAREIMMUNE, and it's spelled with the letter R. Surthrival. Thriving no matter the circumstances. Go to surthrival.com to check out the entire product line. Also, remember that WildFed is more than a podcast. We produce an internet video series as well, and you can find that at wild-fed.com. Season 1 is 8 30-minute premium TV episodes. Head over to wild-fed.com to see the first episode for free and to sign up for our newsletter, The Subsistence, which includes exclusive stories, photos, and videos from me about the modern wild foods lifestyle. And lastly, before I introduce today's episode, I want to tell you about a new sticker we've got over at wild-fed.com. It's a kind of retro design in the theme of those old Rod and Gun Club logos. It's a circular sticker featuring a foraging basket, rifle, and fishing rod, and reads WildFed. Hunt, forage, fish. We used my personal foraging basket, my suppressed 308 rifle, and my ground fishing rod and reel combo as the models for the image, and we're really proud of it. So head over to wild-fed.com to check that out and to check out the rest of our merch as well. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed Podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. So this is an episode I've been wanting to record for a long time. I've been watching these two on social media for a couple of years, really admiring the way they take wild ingredients and elevate them to their fullest potential, hence their brand, Elevated Wild. These folks hunt, fish, forage, and trap on the land and waters of Virginia with a passion that I can definitely relate to. The food they harvest gets used for more than just subsistence. They're helping to push the boundaries of wild food cuisine forward with techniques and recipe development, and they post about all of that on their website and social media. In fact, as you're listening, head over to their Instagram and give them a follow at Elevated Wild. Their passion for wildness goes further than just food. As you'll hear later in the episode, they, like me, feel that developing a food-centric relationship with wild landscapes is the missing component that leads to real conservation. After all, what's someone's motivation to conserve an open landscape or the species that live there if they don't have a significant and meaningful relationship to that place or those creatures? So meet Wade and Rachel, two wild food generalists who are working together to elevate our wild food culture. I have a feeling you'll be hearing a lot more about them in the years to come. And make sure you're utilizing their content as a resource. They've done a lot of the work, and now you get to enjoy the benefits. Well, I am here with Rachel and Wade of Elevated Wild. You guys, I have been kind of a behind-the-scenes fan now for about 2 years, I'd say, following along your Instagram page. And I just want to say, I think it is incredible what you guys are doing. It's really, really beautiful. So it's just great to have you guys both on the show.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I was recently talking to Hank Shaw, who I think of as kind of just like really one of the key players in our culture of wild foods. And he mentioned you guys specifically as he was talking about people who have really incredible food projects going right now. And I just thought that was so cool. So it seems like you guys have garnered attention from on high in with what you're doing. So give us a little bit of a background. Who are you guys? And tell us about Elevated Wild.
Well, Wade, why don't you kick it off?
Okay. Well, we both, we met each other in the restaurant industry, and I had just gotten into hunting, and from there we basically have progressed to where we are now. It's just kind of a deep passion for food and knowing where it comes from and sustainability and mindfulness, etc. And it's just kind of grown, and we just we love food and we love eating and we love knowing where our food comes from. So we spend all our time, just outside and interacting with nature as much as possible. And I think the Elevated Wild just kind of came from that, where it's, I don't know. I don't know. Personally, I was kind of tired of seeing bacon wrapped jalapeno, whatever. And, I just feel like wild game is such a unique and underappreciated ingredient in general that it needed to be kind of showcased in a more modern light. And I think it'll appeal to more people. And I think getting more people involved with, wild food is the best way to preserve the wild places.
Man, that part you just added, I think, is because you just sort of like tacked that on at the end, and it's such a huge thing. So I want to make sure we really unpack that. But you said that when you guys first met, you had just started hunting. So how long ago was that, and what's your backgrounds? I come to this as somebody who started. I had foraged and dabbled in wild foods for many years, but I really didn't start hunting till about 5 years ago, and have gotten really serious about it in that period of time. So it's always interesting to me when people start later. I'm kind of curious, like, what's your journey been, the two of you, with hunting, fishing, and foraging?
Yeah, Rachel can take that.
Oh, yeah, sure. So we actually kind of wound up approaching it in the opposite direction that you did. We kind of started hunting, and then we got into the foraging aspect. When we first met, like Wade said, he had just gotten into hunting. And I didn't grow up doing any real hunting or fishing or foraging. Nobody in my family. It's just not really part of my direct heritage. But when Wade and I first met and we first started dating, he had just, I think it was maybe his second deer season. And, our first summer together, all we did was fish together. And our first fall, he took me out on my first deer hunt. And so we've really, and he didn't grow up hunting either. And so really, as our relationship has progressed, we've also gotten deeper and deeper into, the outdoors world. And I think it's really been cool to watch it evolve. I think, gosh, how long have we been together? Like 9 years now, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. We can't keep track. But, and every year, every season, we get to try something new. And I don't know. It's been really, really cool getting into it and getting in touch with our food. We're both really passionate about food and cooking. Coming from the restaurant industry, Wade in back of house cooking, me in front of house waiting tables. We've had the privilege of interacting with a lot of food and really getting to the nitty gritty about how it's put together and how to, compose a dish. And being able to translate that into wild ingredients has really been a cool journey.
Okay, because I'm curious about your restaurant backgrounds then a little bit, if you want to say anything more about it, because when I look at your pages, like I'd say kind of an area where we're a little bit, so one of the differences between, let's say, my page and the page you guys do is that I'm not so good on the culinary side. That's not really my strength or my background. So I tend to write a lot on the ecology side, and I focus in a lot on how the harvest is and all of that. When I go over to your page, I'm like, man, they have this presentation of this food down, and the cooking is so clean. It looks like it's extremely high-end food photography and really, really awesome execution. So I've been wondering where that comes from. So what was the background for you guys? You said you met in the restaurant industry, but tell us a little bit about, how you got there.
Um, well, my parents opened a restaurant when I was really young, like 10 or, oh, I'm sorry, 11 or 12. And I've always kind of been in a restaurant, worked in a restaurant through college. And it's always been kind of a means to an end. It was just like I had to pay the bills, had to buy beer, whatever it was. But it wasn't until I started, working more with the kitchen and with the chefs and getting into sourcing and meeting the farmers and, like getting like face-to-face interactions with the purveyors that I started realizing like how food comes to your plate. It's not just from a truck onto a plate. It's like somebody had to grow this, somebody had to go out and get this. And that was always really intriguing to me because, it has a lot more story and meaning when you actually get to see the guy or the gal
Mm-hmm.
and, they're sweaty and their hands are rough. And it's like that food always tasted better. I'm not sure, I never did a side by side comparison, but like the food that had a little more story to it always
Yeah.
seemed to be the best. And
Yeah.
I think both of us, I think that's one of the most compelling parts of hunting and fishing and foraging for us is, it all has so much meaning. We all, like, we remember when it's easy and we remember when it's hard and we remember when we're unsuccessful. And there's no guarantee to any of it. And I think that's kind of shaped our, day-to-day worldview. Is just like nothing is easy and nothing really should be easy. You should have to work for it. And it's not a given, like it's never like we're going to get this thing. It's let's go try, So I don't know. The meals just mean a little more. We don't throw anything away, it's just it has a lot more value than something that has an expiration date on it.
Yeah, that's I liken it sometimes to I'll say to people, like, if you show up in a new town and you don't know anybody and you look out at the crowd of people, like you have no stories about anybody. You go to your hometown, you look out and you're like you see your family. It's like still just faces, but you have all these stories and meaning associated to those people. And I feel like that with food when you know the origin story. It's like the eating experience is so different because you have all this background. But Rachel, what was your background in the restaurant world?
Oh gosh. I mean, it starts out, as a high school, college job, and I worked all over. And then eventually I wound up at the same restaurant that Wade was working at. It was called Quebeca. And they were kind of like a wine and tapas focused environment. There was a wine shop there. And that was kind of where we met. And that was kind of my first introduction to higher end, locally sourced dining. And
Okay.
when Wade took over the kitchen there in particular, it was really, really cool. He had worked at a similar high end restaurant before. And so, he was coming at it with that uh, ethos of sourcing locally and bringing in, underappreciated fish or whole cuts of meat that he was breaking down. And, working around that was just fascinating. And, it really did, growing up, I always had this mentality that, I was always fascinated by food. I was never a picky eater. And that mentality that you should know where your food comes from, and especially your meat. I think that meat, ethically speaking, you can get into some gray areas there pretty quick. And so I was always on the fence about the factory farmed meat. And so, working alongside Wade and seeing what he was doing both in the kitchen at Quebeca and also in the kitchen at home really piqued my interest in hunting.
You guys are in, is it correct? You're in Virginia?
Yeah, Fredericksburg, Virginia.
Cool. So tell me a little bit about the area that you're in. My perception of you guys, again from just sort of the distance of social media, is that you seem like generalists in your approach to gathering food. So, like you meet those people who are specialists, where it's like they are just all about buck hunting, or all they
Mhm.
do is turkey hunting, or they're just foragers or whatever. But I get this perception that you guys are generalists because I see you fishing, I see you hunting mammals, I see you hunting a lot of birds. It looks like. So, I was just reviewing recipes on your website and seeing different plants that you're working with. So it looks like you're taking this really generalist approach. And I see you on the sea, and I see you, in the woods. And so, what's the environment like, and what are the environments that you guys are kind of acquiring your food from?
Oh man, Virginia is a great place to be a generalist. I'll tell you that much. Wade
Yeah.
and I have been talking about it a lot lately. In Virginia, you get 6 deer tags just right off the bat.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, just straight off the bat, you get your 6 deer tag.
Just with your hunting license.
Yeah, well, when you buy your big game tags,
Yeah.
and
Wow.
you've got your 3 turkeys. You've got
Three
it's
turkeys.
yeah. I mean, good luck with that, but you got the tags for them.
Yeah.
And we've got the mountains within an hour of us. We've got the bay within an hour of us. Virginia doesn't have a reputation for being this place with incredible natural resources, but when you actually look at the abundance that's here, it is. I mean, man, we are spoiled. We are spoiled with the richness around us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be real hard to starve around here if even tried a little bit. I mean, there's 4 seasons. There's a lot of growth, both plant and animal. And, you know, like Rachel said, we're an hour from the bay, and that's one of the richest waters in the world, I think. I mean, it's just
What bay is it?
teeming. The Chesapeake Bay.
Oh, okay. So you guys are you're like striper nursery there too, then, right?
Oh
That's
yeah.
where they're all going in the wintertime?
Yeah.
Because we don't see
Yeah. I
them
mean,
until May, June,
Yeah, I mean, we were just out there on the shore on the east side of the bay, and we fished for half a day, and I don't know, we caught our keepers, but we probably caught 70, 80 undersized fish in 3 or 4 hours.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
it's when it's good, it's incredible, and it is like Rachel said, it's kind of like sleeper state. Like you don't have the biggest bucks here, you don't have the biggest bears, you don't have the biggest anything, or like the most turkeys, or the best duck hunting, but you can do everything.
Hmm.
Like the duck hunting's okay if the weather comes in. The goose hunting is pretty phenomenal if you know the right people, and the deer hunting is pretty good. I mean, like I
Yeah.
said, you get 6 tags off the bat, and you can buy 6 more, and it's
Wow.
pretty, yeah,
Oh my gosh. I
yeah.
mean,
There's
we're
no
we're a one deer
draws.
state, so it's like I hear these stories, and it's like, yeah, I have this sort of like philosophical life thing that I live by. It's like this idea that I'd rather be number two in everything than number one at anything. So, like the idea of a state where it's like maybe it's not the number one this or the number one that, but you kind of got number two everything. It's like that's where I want to be. So that's really cool. So, one question I had for you: do you guys have a boat? Are you chartering, or how are you getting out on the bay
Oh, we
there?
got a tiny little boat.
The boat's name is Misadventure.
Oh,
She's a 14-foot semi V John, aluminum, riveted, leaky, and she has
okay.
done, God, everything.
Who makes it?
It's a Starcraft. I think it's made
Yeah.
in like '68 or '69.
Oh,
You
cool.
know, we've had to patch it up a lot, but
Sure. How
it's
much power's it
it's one
got?
of it's got a 9.9 on it now.
Yeah.
Um, we'll take it into the bay on we got to pick our weather, obviously, but it does everything inshore, and anything in the river is fine. We do have some friends with bigger boats for going a little further off into the bay, like Cobia Fishing and things like that. But 99% of our fishing is done near shore, and we'll go out in our little tiny boat, and we've we've been on bridges where there's like a 30 or 40-foot boat next to us, and we're out fishing them. It's just like you don't need much
Yeah.
to do it. You just have to do it, you know. And I think there's this barrier to entry that people see. Like, you see a bunch of sport boats out there, and you're like, well, I need a sport boat, and it's like you're never going to be able to afford it, you know. Like, if that stops you from doing it, you're not going to ever do it.
Not to mention, like, I mean, now I got my first boat a couple years ago, a 20-foot Lund Alaskan, and
Nice.
We love one.
yeah, it's a great boat, but I'm also learning now why people always joke with you about what a bad investment boats are, you know, because I bought it new, and it's been kind of an ass kicker for me. It was my first boat, and, you know, I remember my first time putting it in the water, having no idea what I'm doing, dinging it all up. I've run it aground. I've, you know, at winterizing it because I live in the, like, harshest of, you know, the Northeast, the harshness of Maine. So it's like, it's a money pit, but it's awesome to have. But when I see those sport fishing boats, it's like, I would rather charter that boat for the day. You know, it's
Oh,
like,
I
just,
know.
I can't imagine. You got to
It's
be
definitely
dedicated to
cheaper.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, if you're a generalist, like we were talking about. So yeah, so when I see you guys, because it looks to me like you do a lot of cobia fishing. I've noticed over the years, I see a lot of that. So you're going out with friends when you do that?
Generally, yeah. We've got a
Yeah.
couple friends that live on the middle neck and the northern neck, and they've got slightly bigger boats, you know, just like, you know, between 18 and 24 feet center consoles usually. And, you know, this time of the year is just prime cobia fishing. I mean, I think my last trip out there with them, we were only on the water for 3 hours. We had 10 or 12 bites, you know, landed all of those.
Oh, wow.
3 of them were keepers, you know, like the biggest was 52. The day before was 54. So it's like big game hunting in regards of like what you're doing and what you're coming back with, you know, like 150 pounds of fish
Yeah.
in the boat, you know, with 3 fish is substantial, you know. So it's fun. We have a lot of like-minded friends, and they like being on the water, they like hunting, and it's I don't know, everybody kind of has something they can chip in on, you know. Like, we don't have the big boat, but we have friends that have the big boat, and, you know, it's just, there's back and forth there. You know, I do a lot of canning with Rachel and a lot of salamis and dry cure stuff, and we're always giving that to our friends.
When I told my wife I was talking to you guys today, she's like, didn't they send us something? And I was like, yeah, they sent us the tamales, because that's what really stood out to me, the tamales you guys did with
Yeah.
turkey. And she's like, yeah, but they also sent us that cured meat. Like, that really stuck out to her. You know, she loves charcuterie. So I think you had sent Canada Goose charcuterie of some kind, if I recall. But so thank you from her and from me. Could you guys kind of walk me through your wild food year? Like, where do you know? What is your? Have you guys found a sort of rhythm? It's like, it's this season, then it's this season, then it's this season.
Oh,
Like, as you roll
absolutely.
through. Yeah, tell me a little bit about it. Walk me through the journey of what it's like being out there with you guys for a year.
Oh man. So like starting right now, we're getting into snakehead season. We're actually coming a little bit late to it. And so the next couple weeks, we'll probably split our time fishing on the bay and then fishing around here for snakeheads.
Now, this is an invasive Asiatic species we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. So they were introduced to the Potomac watershed, gosh, probably 10 years ago now. And they really made it their home. You know, there's all kinds of myths and rumors about, you know, these fish like walking around on land and eating chihuahuas.
Right, right. I
I
see
can
that.
tell you conclusively that is not true. And, you know, the DGIF's done a lot of work to study their impact on, you know, the watersheds they're inhabiting. And I'm not saying like, you know, put one in a bucket and take it with you and put it somewhere else. But so far, they're not as bad as the initial media reports cracked them up to be. And they're a
As far as
fantastic.
their invasiveness and the problems that they were going to cause.
Yeah, yeah. You know, they're at least in the Potomac. So far, it seems like all the native fish species are staying stable.
Okay.
So
How are they? Well, how is eating them? And I got to say, there's a picture. I think it's you, Wade, holding one up, a really big one, on your Instagram feed there. And for anybody listening to this right now, you know, go over to at Elevated Wild on Instagram, and they get beautiful photography there. But that fish has got a skin that looks like a boa constrictor or something. I mean, it's
Oh
quite
yeah, no,
snake-like, right?
oh, it definitely, like, it lives up to its name for sure. You know, it's got a very snake, diamond patterned, like coloration, and, you know, they've got a very like snake like mouth. The eyes are set really far forward, so they do kind of look like snakes. You know,
Wow.
there's definitely no like there's no mistaking them for anything else really. But as far as table fare goes, I mean, it's the best tasting freshwater fish I've had. Walleye's good, perch is great, but those are like delicate, flaky white fish. Like these things taste more like a saltwater fish, in my opinion. It's like
Oh, wow.
somewhere between like a mahi and a wahoo.
Wow. And
Very
they're
very
big, huh?
lean. Oh, they can get big. Like I think they're going to average around 5 pounds.
It's not bad for a freshwater fish.
Yeah, and the yield's generally pretty high. You get a little more than 40%, closer to 50% when you fillet them. But it's definitely a firm, very mild, semi flaky
Okay.
texture. So you can grill it; it doesn't fall apart on the grill. It takes marinades really well. It takes seasoning. It's just like it. You can't really overpower it, but at the same time, you don't really need to add too much to it. It's just extremely versatile, protein, and like we're encouraged to kill and take them out of the water as any ones that we catch. So it there's really there's no downside to
Right.
fishing for them.
You're angling for them?
Yeah, we're angling. We fish topwater for them mostly, and it is wild. I mean,
Tell me about it.
You don't catch a fish like a snakehead in freshwater. I mean, we fish topwater frogs, and just watching these snakeheads kind of come up out of the grass real slow, and they put their eyes on your lure, and then they just torpedo after it.
Oh,
And the
wow.
blow-ups are just intense. And you don't have a snakehead under control until you've got it in the cooler, and sometimes not even then. I mean, they are
they have a lot of power and a lot of violence to them. Like they have a reputation for being aggressive. I don't particularly think that's true. But when they do strike, it is very much like hang on with everything you got. Like it makes personally it makes largemouth bass fishing just kind of like
tame.
blah. It's like
Yeah.
I can tell if I have a largemouth bass on, depending based on how it feels. And we've cranked in some really nice bass over the years fishing for snakeheads, and we're never that excited about a 5 or 6 pound bass anymore, just because it's just not the same like veracity. Like these things are just like they're just powerhouses.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, and it's always nice when you're eating through an invasive problem too. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So what comes after that?
So late summer is kind of a lull. That's when we're going to start getting geared up for hunting season. Every year we do a ton of deer hunting. And before the deer season opens up, we'll do a little bit of dove hunting. So we'll kind of dabble in that here and there as we find doves. And then we do archery, muzzleloader, and general gun season for deer.
Oh, cool. Now back to real quick on the doves. I'd be curious. How do you guys like to prepare doves? And what's you're talking about morning doves?
Yeah.
Oh, they're so delicious. We have morning doves here, but we don't have a dove season. And you can imagine how frustrating that is because, they're here in my yard all the time and it's like, they're so delicious to eat. So I'm curious what you guys do with them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's a better way to cook them than just pluck them and grill them, skin on, you kind of get it's just lightly cooked, medium rare on the breast, and crispy on the skin side. Just real simple, salt and pepper. It is a pretty versatile protein, so you can do anything with it. But I do think skin on the grill is hard to beat as far as doves go.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people don't pluck them, and I really think that's a shame. The skin is delicious.
You mean just that they're breasting them out?
Yeah.
There's also, I just find the whole animal delicious. Like the legs are great. I'm the one like sucking everything off the wings, so I do like them whole too. They're really good like that. And back to your point earlier, like, the jalapeno popper thing, it's funny to me. You brought this up before, Wade, about, being tired of seeing the way everything was wrapped in bacon or put on jalapeno. And I think there's this strange thing where you go to the finest dining restaurants in the world and you see a lot of foraged mushrooms and you see foraged plants and you see game meats and you see wild caught fish, line caught fish, all this stuff. That's considered the highest end cuisine. But then when you go amongst the hunter fisher world, that stuff just gets like sour cream. I mean, like cream cheese, jalapenos and bacon. So it's like this disconnect, because it seems to me that people eating the finest food in the world know that wild foods fit in that category.
Yeah, I think it's pretty complicated, but I think, food traditions are passed on from the people that feed you.
Yeah.
And, you look at like, you go back 2 generations, like almost no American ate like medium rare beef, right? Because like refrigeration wasn't like a big thing. Like not everybody had it. And it's, like
You're saying they would
as,
have to overcook it because,
yeah, like
okay,
most people,
no one's ever said
most,
that to me actually. So that's cool to hear that.
yeah. So a lot of like, like I grew up eating, um, bunch of different cultures, right? Like my parents were Vietnamese and Chinese, and we ate a lot of that. We ate a lot of American food. We went to a Mennonite church, so like I got
Oh,
exposed to a lot of Southern.
wow. That's quite a mix there.
Yeah, I learned what a good pie was for sure, and it's I was exposed to a lot, and Rachel's been exposed to a lot, and we've been exposed to even more as we grew up working in the restaurant industry of like all these different types of food. But if you grow up just being told like, hey, this is how we do dove and this is how we do
Right.
venison, it's wrapped in bacon. It's like, that's just what you do. And I think a lot of people don't think about it twice because it's just like, that's how you grew up doing it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, but it kind of shuts you off from this whole other, side of it where it's like, this is a highly delicious, high quality protein. Like you should treat it like that. And there's been, I think, a huge disconnect between treating wild game like you would treat high-end ingredients, up until very recently with like Rene Redzepi and, guys like that who are putting forage and wild foods at the forefront and making it kind of like, this is what the best stuff in the world is. But they're basically doing what people have always been doing, and just charging $900,000 a meal. It's cool that they're doing that, and they're exposing the world to the food that's right in front of them this whole time.
That's interesting. I appreciate what you're saying too about the idea that, people get stuff passed on because like you said, there's nothing wrong with it. But once you get exposed to what can be done with it, it's like, oh, this could be even better. All right. So then you go into your deer season. So you guys are multiple methods of take. Again, the generalist thing. So you're doing a little bit of archery, a little bit of firearm, a little bit of muzzleloader, which I think is just so cool. So you're multidisciplinary in your approach.
Yeah, definitely. We want to hunt and fish as much as possible. And, whatever the season is, I'm there. Whatever the weapon is, we're both there. Early season bow hunting here is pretty warm, and it's, you kind of have to pick your days. I love, hunting with archery tackle, but, I personally prefer using a gun.
I like you even more, Wade. I like you even more.
It's just like, for me, I know it's a more powerful weapon and it's going to extend my range. And generally speaking, it's going to be a faster kill. Mm-hmm. So preferably I would do that. That being said, there is a bow season and I do want to hunt during bow season. And it's been productive for us. I mean, Rachel, I think, shot all of her whitetails with a bow and her Sika stag last year with a bow. So it's nice. Yeah.
That's cool. So you got your deer season and then you guys roll into pretty heavy into the waterfowling, huh?
Yeah. We've got a couple splits that are in the fall. But then once December rolls around in January, that's all we're doing is waterfowling. And waterfowling's just a whole different game. I mean, I remember when we first got into it. Wade, do you remember that inflatable boat we had?
Yeah.
Lugging decoys and 30-degree weather and an inflatable boat. But it's really an addiction. We've been very, very fortunate to have some public lines nearby that we've been able to take advantage of, especially when we were first getting into it.
They have public lines there.
Mm-hmm, yeah, just a few. It's up on the military base near us.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, yeah. So we were able to, really kind of cut our teeth there. And then we met our good friends, the Latinies, a few years later, and we've been waterfowling with them ever since.
That's cool. So an emphasis on geese, if I understand, but then it looks like I've seen you guys with. I think I just saw a post of some woodies too. So what are any specific species you go after more than others?
It just really depends on like the weather. I mean,
Yeah.
it can be pretty weird here. Like last season, it was 65 degrees around Christmas, so we don't have a big resident duck population here, and the birds don't move this far south until it starts getting cold, a little bit further north of us. So it depends. The geese are definitely the most consistent. Follow that probably by the wood ducks. There's a lot of marshes and swamps and old oxbows and stuff everywhere, and some pretty good public land spots. And you can consistently find some wood ducks and hunt them through most of the season until the water freezes up. So that's kind of always like there when other forms of waterfowl aren't working up.
Talk to me about how you treat these birds once you get them home, and in particular, I'm curious about geese because my experience is really enjoying Canada geese, but it's one of those animals that you always hear about people complaining about eating them. They're too livery or whatever. You hear all this stuff. They're tough, all this kind of thing. So I just find I've personally not experienced it to be that, but I'm really curious about what you guys do from once you harvest the bird, how you're treating them. Hey, we'll get back to the episode in a moment, but first, let's talk about foraging. In particular, let's talk about what container you gather your wild-crafted edibles in. Now, I've tried a lot of items from basic backpacks to 5-gallon buckets. I've used agricultural trays and plastic bags, and sometimes I even use my hat. But nothing's better than a basket. That's because baskets are rigid enough to protect delicate leaves and fruits from bruising or getting crushed, yet they're flexible enough to wear comfortably all day. They're extremely lightweight and breathe and drain water, making sure the produce you harvest stays fresh until you get it home. And because they're made from organic materials, they look and feel great. Even after 100,000 years, baskets are still the best tool for the job. In particular, I'm a big fan of pack baskets you can wear on your back. But they can be expensive, hard to find, and even harder to make. Corey at Slater Baskets makes outstanding quality custom pack baskets, turns your order around fast, and ships them inside the continental US for free. In most cases, you'll be foraging with your new pack basket in just over a week, and that's hard to beat. I had Corey make me 4 baskets, a large and small pack basket, a blicky for hanging off my belt while I forage fruits, and a creel for putting my trout in while I fish the mountain streams. Corey can make you a match set too, or you can purchase your basket a la carte. Check out Corey's work on Instagram as @ADK Baskets. That's Alpha Delta Kilo Baskets. Again, it's @ADK Baskets. If you connect with him on Instagram, you can use the coupon code WildFed for $20 off your order. In other words, don't use his Etsy page if you want to use the coupon code. Again, it's WildFed, and it gets you $20 off your order as long as you contact him through Instagram. These are fantastic baskets, and he gets them to you fast. Again, it's Corey at ADK Baskets on Instagram. Now, here's the rest of the show.
Well, most of our birds, unless they're really shot up or something, we pluck whole like as much as we can. Try to maximize the yield of everything we take. But geese in particular, we've shot some marsh geese, and they definitely have a little more of that kind of funkier tone to them, but they were definitely not bad.
Okay.
But the geese that we generally hunt are over ag fields, and they're eating soy and corn and winter wheat, and they might as well be, grain
Farm
finished.
birds. Yeah.
I mean, they are super tasty, nice clean fat, real healthy, and like I think if you served it to somebody and didn't tell them it was goose, they'd be hard pressed to guess it was goose. It's just really good lean red meat. The fat's clean, and we do a lot of just roasting, like whole breast skin on, and just shaving it, kind of like you would a steak or something.
Mm-hmm.
but the legs and the legs and the wings are, I think, where you can get a little more creative and, braising them down, doing confits, and just like kind of making them tender because they are definitely very tough.
Yeah.
Um,
They're using them.
that's Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, like a wing takes a long time to break down in a crock pot, but
Okay.
when it does, you've got all that connective tissue and all that collagen and
Mm.
all that tough dark red meat that has all this flavor in there. And once that breaks down enough where it's tender, it's just, I mean, it's the best part, I think.
That's cool. What are you guys hunting like laid out in ag fields then? Like tell us about your hunting style for them. Are you on the water or are you you're in fields? And with decoys?
Oh, definitely decoys. We most of our goose hunting is in fields. We have brush blinds kind of like tucked into field edges or, in a hedgerow or something. We don't do a lot of layout hunting.
Cool.
Um, as far as hunting on open water, we'll hunt in the marshes near the Potomac sometimes for geese. Um, but that's kind of like a duck and goose hunt kind of combo thing where
Yeah.
it's like if there are ducks down there, we'll go down there and we can usually work a couple geese into the spread as well.
Cool. And then what comes after that for you guys? What's winter all about?
Um, well, we've recently gotten into trapping a little more.
Oh, cool. That's like
Yeah.
such a dying art, right? Like we had a trapper safety class up here I took a couple years ago and it was really hard to find one. You have to in the state to be able to trap and then finding a class was such a challenge because so few people are doing it. And then I remember that a huge part of the class was focused on public relations because trapping has just got such a negative reputation. And unfortunately, it's just like I think this important aspect that's so forgotten. It's really easy to say hunt, fish, forage, and leave trapping out because it's just people don't think about it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the optics of it are definitely not easy to,
Mm-hmm.
defend. It's just like when you see a picture, an old timey picture of a trapper, it's usually a guy standing with a bunch of furs, right? It's
Yeah,
not a
right.
guy there with a bunch of food.
Or like a fox with a leg hold trap is not like great optics
Yeah,
either.
exactly. And we don't do, we only trap stuff that we want to eat or are going to attempt to eat, or if we're doing somebody a service and like trying to remove nuisance animals. But most of our trapping is beaver trapping,
Yeah.
and they're a tasty animal.
What a
It's
meat that is, right? It's
exactly.
unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, every time we expose somebody to that, and we're like, "Hey, you got to try this," and they're like, "This is amazing. What is it?" And we're like, "It's beaver." And like nobody would
Then you got to go
guess
through
at.
like 9 minutes of jokes as people like acclimate
Yeah,
to saying it, right? It's like the super awkward moment where you got to like, okay, let's go through all the beaver eating jokes.
yeah.
Right.
Get on the
Yeah.
other side of that.
Yeah, but once you're on the other side of that, I mean, it is just a good lean red meat. I mean, it tastes a
Mhm.
lot like bison, in my opinion. It's like
Yeah. Yeah, it
somewhere
does.
between like venison and elk and bison. It's just they're eating tubers, they're eating like vegetables and like
Right.
starches. So I don't know why they wouldn't be tasty, but we've been experimenting a lot with that. The back straps are just perfectly fine as steaks, and we've got
Beyond
some
perfectly fine with steaks. My wife was
yeah.
like, "This is the best steak I've ever eaten." It was just salt and pepper, cooked rare,
Yeah, I
just
mean,
unreal.
yeah, it really is phenomenal.
Yeah.
We've got some of the hams hanging up for prosciutto, and we've
Oh, neat.
barbecued a bunch and smoked a bunch, and I mean, it's really an underappreciated protein.
And the
Yeah.
fat too. The fat is
Oh
excellent.
yeah,
Yeah, so are you rendering it or yeah, did you do a beaver biscuit or something? A beaver fat biscuit maybe? Did I see something like that?
Yeah, we did. We've done a couple different things with beaver, but I don't remember what we've posted and what we've just R&D'd at this point.
But
But
you're rendering that fat out?
yeah.
That's so cool. It's cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody just gave us some bear fat, so I want to do like a side by side of like you know the texture of the bear fat and the flavor versus the beaver fat because it looks really similar in
Okay.
density. At room temp, it's kind of like you can kind of push into it a little
Bit of a
bit, and when you
gel,
put in,
yeah.
yeah, and I mean they're both clean tasting, and it's just it's just like a resource that is underappreciated, misunderstood, and I think with the trapping optics we were talking about earlier, it's like I'm keeping these furs, but I'm doing this because of the food.
Yeah.
Rachel and I doing everything we do because of the food. And again, when you expose somebody to something that's like, hey, this is tasty, and they're like, I've never had that before, I feel like it's easy to make those connections. Like, oh, you trap and you eat these things. That's perfectly fine. But the optics of just stacking up, furs and pelts and stuff just
Right.
doesn't look good these days.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate because, most of the atrocities to the ecosystem that have taken place over time, it's not, there's this story. It's like, oh, it's the greed of the trapper. It's like, no, it's the people who wanted the hats in the
Yeah,
city. You know what I mean? It's usually the urban population who's buying all the stuff. And then later, historically, it gets blamed on the people who went out for them, paid to harvest for them. You know what I mean? So,
exactly.
it's a weird one there, but because everybody sure was loving those beaver hats when they had them. But yeah, it's an interesting one. The people I know who are beaver trappers, I know a lot of specialists. Like that's their passion, so they're just so on it and so excited about it. I'm just starting to dabble, so it's cool to hear that. So you guys are doing that in the winter. Does that go right through till the spring?
I wish.
Yeah, it's about a month,
Okay.
about 6 months. I mean, I'm sorry, 6 weeks of that, and then there's a little bit of a lull between trapping season and really anything else. We'll get into turkey season, and that's where I kind of get obsessive. And turkey hunting is like becoming one of my new favorite things. So we didn't really do it until about 2 years ago, and this year with things being what they are, I had a lot of time. And Rachel hunted 2 days a week whenever she had days off, and I hunted almost 5 days a week. So it was a hell of a time.
Yeah. Anything you want to say about it?
Well, yeah, turkey hunting will humble you. That's for sure.
It's so funny because it's such a simple animal in some regards, and then it's like, the hunt is so complicated, and so, you see people going out with so much equipment and so many decoys, all this stuff, and then it's like, it's funny. It's an upland game bird, but man, they are tricky.
Yeah, I mean, like I feel like the first we shot a double, like I think second weekend, and those birds came in pretty much picture perfect. They saw the decoys, they heard the calling, and they came running in, and they were dead. But every bird after that, we had to work for them, and they got very wary. They felt the pressure for sure, and they just would not do what we thought they were going to do. It was just always just like we're one step behind them.
Right. I've been talking to I got a friend at the National Wild Turkey Federation, one of the regional directors, and also a friend of mine is the biologist here in Maine for upland game birds. So I just was talking to them, and they were saying the impacts of COVID. One of the impacts has been that so many more hunters were out so much more of the week. So the birds felt an unusual amount of pressure this year. They didn't get those Monday through Friday kind of, a fraction of the hunters are out, and people hit it pretty hard. And so everyone's stomping through the woods, at least up here, which, I hit it real hard the first 3 days, so I could kind of get beat done. But you find yourself calling a lot. You're doing hen calls mostly and using hen decoys.
Yeah. It depends on, what I see kind of going on, but I'm a big fan of antagonizing the animal, via like Jake decoy or buck decoy or whatever it may be. If I can get them fired up, they can kind of like ignore my mediocre calling.
That's it. Yeah, I mostly hunt from behind a fan with a gobble call. That's my favorite.
Nice.
I find it far more effective and exciting than doing the hen calls. I mean, I'll use that too, but I think that's cool you do that. So that leads you guys right into spring and kind of catches us up to here. What else? What are some other? I'm sure there's other things that you could sprinkle in there. What else you guys like to get up to throughout the year?
Yeah. We do a little bit of squirrel hunting here and there, nothing too crazy.
Oh yeah, cool. I love
but
squirrel hunting. Wow.
We've got Sika deer here in Virginia, and
Okay.
so we're going to have a Sika trip.
Tell us about that. So the Sika deer are this is the deer from the West Coast, or this is another species?
This is a different species. They're a Japanese species. They were introduced to
the little deer in the swamps there that I've seen. Okay,
Yep.
so tell us about that. Yeah.
So we've got those in the Maryland and Virginia area on the Eastern Shore. And they've kind of, I think they were a really well kept secret for a long time. But it seems like word's starting to get out about them, so I don't feel too bad talking
Those
about
meat
it.
eater folks.
Yeah, I know.
Giving away your secrets.
Yep, yep. So, yeah, no, they're fun to hunt. This is our, I guess we've been out 3 times now after them, and this past trip, I shot my stag, and we're going to be
Congratulations.
planning at least one more trip out there this year. And it
Cool.
is
And
just
this
a
is
wild.
irrespective of your, this is unrelated to your whitetail tags, or does it count as one of your whitetail tags?
No, this is a Depop tag.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you're hunting like mini elk in a salt marsh, and you can hear the Atlantic Ocean on one side of you, and it's a
Oh,
pretty
wow.
phenomenal scene. Like they bugle. It's like elk hunting in the Virginia salt marsh. I mean, that's kind of what
Wow.
it is, and they're really spooky, and they're definitely one of the tastiest things we've ever had. I mean, it's just like it. Like the beaver is really good. Like the Sika deer is better,
yeah,
Wow.
and yeah. I mean, like it's just a lot of fun. It's a really cool environment, and there's nothing quite like it. Like you can hunt whitetails out there as well, and again, you can hear the ocean and you can smell the bay water, and
Mm.
you have all this like super flat pine stand and phragmite and marsh, and you can't really see that far. It's just like everything is kind of real uptight and close, and hearing one of those things bugle behind you is pretty cool.
Are you using calls when you're out there for them,
Yeah,
or yeah, no kidding, huh? Wow, that's really neat.
yeah.
That's really neat. Um, Talk to me a little bit about so if somebody goes to elevatedwild.com, it's largely, I would guess I would describe it as like a recipe blog, right? That's the preponderance of the content there. So correct me if I'm wrong there, and then I'm curious, what what is your approach to the cooking aspect of this? What are you guys trying to bring? I see a lot of cured meat there, so that's one thing I'm seeing a lot of. But yeah, like what's your sort of unique, what are you guys contributing to the wild food movement? Because there's so much. You guys are, I think you guys are going to be leaving quite an impact. It's obvious that your stuff is up leveling the game a lot. So what do you guys see yourself bringing, and what are you trying to bring to the cuisine side of it?
Um, you know, I, we're lucky that we both have such like diverse backgrounds in food and what we like and what we don't like, and there's nothing that we shy away from as far as cooking. Sometimes we'll throw a dart at a globe and be like, all right, let's cook something from this general area. Try to learn about it, and I think that helps. But I think that our main goal, I don't think we sat down and was like, this was our goal when we started doing this, but it's kind of evolved into this, is like showing wild game and wild food in general just in a different light, just exposing people to be like, oh, you can make salami with venison, you can make salami with goose, you can cook with beaver fat, you can cook with deer fat, and it's just helping people register that like some of the underappreciated or often tossed aside pieces can be usable, but also that wild food as a whole can be used in more ways than traditionally thought, at least in like this generation or so. It's
Deer
like
tallow chocolate chip cookies caught my eye on your
yeah,
website. It's like such a cool, that's like one of those things where I mean, I see everything from we just take the back straps and leave the animal in the field, to people who really try to utilize everything. And but the tallow is one of those things that almost universally people are like, oh no, there's no use for it. And it's like, I don't know about that. There's a use for the deer, that's for sure. It's using it as fat, so it's got to have some application here. So I just think
yeah.
that
I
was
mean,
really cool.
yeah. I think that's definitely one of those things that's just passed down. I don't know how many people have told me, well, I've heard that the deer tallow is bad, and I'm like, have you had it yourself? And
Hmm.
the answer is usually no. It's just
Right.
like somebody you trust tells you something, and you just go with it, and that's it's pretty normal. But working with food for so long, it's like you realize like almost everything is edible. Everything's edible once at least. So, and like what's the worst thing that can happen is like you don't like it, like it's fine. And I think Rachel and I both approach it in that way. It's like neither one of us is scared about not liking something. Like finding out something that we don't like is great because then we kind of dissect it. Like, why don't we like it? Is it the texture? Is it the underlying flavors? Is it cooked improperly? But there's very little wild food that we've found so far. From mushrooms to birds to anything else that's not good on some level. Like it may not be the best for whatever application, but there's almost nothing that we have found that is not good and worth taking advantage of.
Total agreement with you guys on that point. I want to talk too about fish collars. I just feel like this is one of the most underutilized cuts of meat and one of the most flavorful. And I was looking at your cobia collars, so I'm wondering if you could talk about what a fish collar is, give people an application. So for people who are fishing, who are like used to just taking fillets, talk to them about this and why they should be thinking about the collars of especially their larger fish.
Well, the collar is it's basically the bony structure behind the gill plate before you get to the fillets, the pectoral fins. And we just pop that out. You just kind of cut along the belly all the way up to the top of the gill plate and cut the gills out. And then you kind of separate it at the top and it comes out in like this, kind of like horseshoe shape. But you have this skin on one side with a lot of bone structure, and you basically have these cavities of meat that have a linear structure. And Rachel, I think, described it the best to me one time. We were eating rockfish collars, and she's like, "This tastes like jumbo lump crab meat," and it has that same like texture where it's kind of like not stringy, but linear. And because those muscles don't do a lot of work, they're extremely tender and they're extremely juicy. And any fish that's big enough where taking the collar off seems like a reasonable thing to do, like we do it. It's a very underappreciated cut. And I mean, we took the collars off this cobia this week. Those collars are 2 pounds each.
Oh my goodness, really?
Yeah, and we ate one each for dinner. It's just like it's another full meal with something that would normally go in the trash, and it's definitely a underappreciated cut.
Anything you want to say about it, Rachel?
Oh man, and they're fun to eat too. We love to cook crabs. Being from Virginia, and a lot of Marylanders, I'm sure, can relate to. But sitting around eating crabs with your hands it's a really fun way to eat. And you do the same thing with those collars. I mean, you take them apart like you would a blue crab. You kind of break them apart and pull the meat out from between those bones. And I don't know, man. Those were especially a rockfish collar. The cobia collars are excellent too, but man, you can't beat a rockfish collar.
And when you guys say rockfish, you mean striped bass?
Yeah.
It's interesting how you travel around the country and you get, there's different species depending on where you are. So we don't say it so much up here. We say stripers, but go south and they start saying that. I like what you just said too about the tactile nature of eating the collar being a bit like with a blue crab. My friend Tony Seachrist, who owns the restaurant The Wild in Savannah, he's a dockside restaurant, so he's got blue crab traps right off his docks. But he's like, nobody will pick them anymore. He's like, I can't sell them in my restaurant because people have gotten too lazy to break them apart. And I was really frustrated to hear that because, I mean, we're a lobster culture up here in Maine, of course. And so, that's similar in that, it's all about using your hands. But sit me down to 12 blue crabs and some Old Bay, I'm pretty happy too, because I like to interact with my food like that,
Yeah.
And like you said, with the collars or any of the fish frames, when you roast them up or whatever, it's really nice to have that experience of feeling what your fingers are made to do. So I like that you bring that up.
Exactly. I mean, I think as a whole, like people, we've gotten so like a far away from being in touch with our food.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Rachel remembers when we were working together in a restaurant, like how many whole fish I would sell that would come back and people are like, I want the head taken off. They have no problem eating it, but they just don't want to be reminded that it had a face, and like, it's, they want crab cakes, but they don't want to, pick crabs. It's just, I think there's a disconnect that we've been, as a society become accustomed to. It's like, food is food and it's not really an animal anymore. And
Yeah,
I think hunting,
it's easy.
yeah,
It's got to be quick. You've got to be full immediately. People say they don't like to
Yeah.
cook crabs because they're like, well, I'll never be full. And I'm like, well, if the only thing you're looking for is a full stomach, like, why bother with food? They sell
Yeah.
Soylent now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think another component of it too, I talk to people a lot about how, hey, I'm like, hey, what is food? Because I find that most people are a little ill-equipped to define it. And I'll be like, well, food's body parts. It might be a plant's body parts, or it might be a mushroom's body parts, or it might be an animal's body parts, but we eat body parts. And when you're involved in the process, you start to develop relationships with creatures, whether they're plant or fungi or animal or algal or whatever they are, but these are living beings, and you start to develop relationships with them. And I think people get confused and think if you kill and eat something, you don't like it. They don't understand that it's the opposite. You come to love it more. And Wade, you brought up the point earlier, and I noticed it's in the biographical section for you and you guys about page, where you kind of are talking about the way that wild foods give you a relationship to the landscape in such a way that you have a desire to protect it. So I'm curious you guys' perspective on that too, because I think there's so much, it's so vociferous. We hear so much about saving the environment, and most of the people saying it so loudly almost never actually experience it. And if they do, it's in such a hands-off way that and I don't want to judge it, but but here I'm going to. It sometimes feels a little the relationship that people have with so-called nature sometimes looks kind of meaningless when you're used to having relationships with species, and their annual cycle, and when they breed, and what they eat, and you harvest them, and their bodies in and out. So just curious your thoughts on sort of how relationships to species and relationships to wild places changes the way that you protect environments or care about them.
Oh man,
well, I think, yeah, go ahead, Rachel.
I've got the rant on this. I'm sorry, Wade.
Please, rant.
I couldn't agree with that more. I would never discourage anybody, no matter what their level of involvement, from trying to protect the environment or being concerned. I think that it's everybody's duty to, stand up and use their voices to protect the world around us. But that being said, I think that the connection that we have as hunters and anglers and foragers to the land around us is, gosh, I mean, it is so much deeper than somebody that's like mildly into recycling, you know? I mean, when I'm at work, I'm looking out my window constantly. I'm looking at the weather. I'm looking at what the plants are doing. I'm watching the birds. I'm listening for ducks when I'm driving to work. There's just, it's integrated into my day to day in a way that, if you take a day trip out once every 3 months to go on a hike, it's just not the same relationship. And I think in particular, hunters and foragers and anglers, we form relationships not just with individual species of animals, but with these environments that nobody's going to drive 6 hours to go to the beaver pond that we trap in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's
Right.
not ever
Yeah.
going to be on the front of a postcard. It's
Oh, good
never going
point.
to be a national park. But if something happens to our beaver pond, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's my beaver pond. Those are my beavers.
Oh no, we're gonna
And
put a target there.
yeah, yeah. And so, but people that they like to go to, like in our area, for example, we've got Shenandoah National Park, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's only a couple hours west of us. And a lot of folks I know that like to be outdoors but aren't really involved, they'll make the drive out there, they'll hike up to the top, they'll take their picture, and then they hike down to the bottom. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the extent of their relationship with that place. And, I want so badly for other people to have the same relationship and the same level of fulfillment that I have with my little postage stamp of a beaver pond, or
Mm-hmm.
like that nasty silt at the bottom of Pope's Creek. Like, I want people to love that the way that I do. And I think the only way that I could have ever reached that point is by interacting with it as a hunter and as an angler.
Oh, I just love what you just said. I mean, I find, like you said, some of the places that are most special to me you could just walk or drive right by and not even notice. But they're special
Oh,
because of what I do there and who I encounter there for species. And man, it's interesting. Like you said, a beaver bog to most people might just be like, a ditch on the side of the road or something.
yeah.
It's not that breathtaking landscape that they want to get the selfie at, but it can mean more to you. So I appreciate how you said that. What are your thoughts, Wade, on this whole thing?
I think, basically echoing what Rachel said, but, I think whenever you participate with nature or the landscape or the animals or whatever it is, I think whether you realize it or not, you come to terms that you're not separate from nature. Like it's not like I'm in a car and I look at nature when I go on a drive. It's like we're just part of it. And I think as soon as we realize that we're a part of nature and not separate from it, we can take responsibility for our actions a little more. It's all the things I've seen and done, through hunting and fishing and foraging and just being outside and interacting and trying to learn. It just makes me more cognizant of like my own impacts. It's just like what kind of weeds are growing right now. Are they actually weeds or are they just weeds? In lawns. What's edible? What's not edible? What's in season? Just like you're just constantly aware of what's going on around you, and you pick up on like things that are not going so well. It's like, oh, they're going to, like you said, build a target over a little marsh, and it's like that's great for the subdivision because they want to get their toilet paper, whatever. But it's like how many bugs are not going to be there for the birds and how many animals are not going to be there because there's no water. And like, what are the actual impacts of what we do? And I think the only way to see that is to be, in it, like getting your hands dirty. I don't think hunting's for everybody. I don't think everybody should do it, but I think everybody should go out there and, just immerse themselves as much as possible in this, this world and realize like they're a part of it. It's not like we're just over here, protecting helpless nature. It's like we're a part of all of this. And I think the sooner we come to terms with that, the better.
Yeah, man, I love it. It's like sometimes I just think people seem more like they're astronauts from another planet than they're actually part of this one, and the way that they talk about it and think about it. And so like that's like a big part of it to me is like, what planet are you from? Because this is Earth, like welcome, like, take your shoes off, get involved a little bit. So I really, I get it. Yeah. Rachel, you got something you wanted to follow up with?
Oh no, I'm in complete agreement. I love the astronaut analogy. The Wade and I are so fortunate that we are able to spend all of our spare time doing this, and that a lot of our friends are also involved in a similar lifestyle. And so sometimes I forget that like what we do isn't normal.
Right. Yep.
That most people don't do this. And so sometimes I'll get into these conversations where I realize that the other person thinks I'm the astronaut.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at them. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, there's no meat at the grocery store. There's plenty of meat. Like,
yeah, I know, right? Oh, I'm sorry. Did the prices go up? I didn't know.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, that's really funny. So, I think we're kind of hinting around about the situation globally, in that our as people who interact with wild places, it's not hard to see that things are. Well, there's two things going on. Sometimes I think environmentalists, so-called, think it's worse than it actually is, because you go out there, you're like, okay, I know we have shifting baseline, so it's not what it used to be. But some people act like it's Mad Max right now, and you're like, hey, actually, come out here. It's there's quite a lot of animals and there's quite a lot of fish, and things aren't that bad. And then on the other side, you got where you see when it isn't good. I think you just sort of mentioned that way, where you're like, actually, you identify problems earlier than a lot of people. So sometimes I think that we're like citizen ecologists, and that we're like really on the front lines, seeing the good and the bad and everything in between, in a way that a lot of people. Yeah, so I think sometimes people are more worried than they need to be, and some people aren't aware at all of like what the problems are. So, I think that those of us who participate this way, we have a perspective that's so important. And what I like seeing, like folks like yourself, where your food becomes this Trojan horse because it gets attention that the average hunter's voice doesn't get. right? It's like, you must notice that I saw you guys have done quite a bit of media from what I can tell. A lot of magazines been interested in papers and things like that. And I'm sure they're less interested in the fact that you hunt and fish than they are about the cuisine that you produce. Is that fair to say? And do you ever feel like that becomes people are interested in that, but then you get to like share this deeper message?
I think it's a combination. It's food is appealing to everybody because everybody eats. Like that's the one thing every human has in common. I think we need air, we need water, and we need food.
Yeah.
Like 5%. It's like 4.5, 5% of Americans hunt. So like, it's like, hey, these hunters over here, like, unless they're doing something horrific, generally people don't really care. But when you can see food, and it's like, hey, these people hunt and look out the delicious food. It's like it gets everybody's attention.
Yeah.
So like you said, it's the Trojan horse. I think it's the thing that we can all rally around because who doesn't want food and who doesn't like eating tasty food and who doesn't, being able to appreciate, the natural world a little more. But also it's like, it's a good way to get people involved. Like a lot of our friends, they don't hunt, they don't fish that much or at all, but they do go around the park and look for mushrooms, or they'll look for spruce tips and they'll look for daylilies and, ramps and whatever it is. And it's just like, they're out there doing the same thing we're doing.
Right.
They're getting their hands dirty and they're just exposing themselves to all the resources that are right in front of us. And again, it's like, they're going to appreciate that one spot that they found some ramps. And if, somebody's like, hey, we're going to bulldozer that whole thing and turn it into a strip mall, they're going to make a stink about it because they're like, that's my ramp spot, So it's just like having individual values and experiences, I think goes an extremely long way. Like, I don't know how many landowners we know that could retire if they just sold off everything, and just let it get developed. But they won't do that because they value the experiences and the memories and the natural environment for what it is more than, a cash payout so they can retire and move to Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like conservation through use really changes how you see the land. I think that I think that leave no trace ethics were really, really well intentioned, but they actually end up creating sometimes a bigger divide. And that's the part that worries me is generations of people who think that you can't interact without destroying, because we all know that you not only can you interact without destroying, but you can actually create more abundance by interacting. And I just think that's beautiful. So what's the future for Elevated Wild? I see that you guys, it looks like you have some nice support from First Light. I saw you guys mentioned Hunt to Eat in your profile. And is it Fiocchi? Is that how you pronounce it? They're a subsidiary of Benelli? Franchi. Okay. I have a Benelli, and so I'm really partial to these inertia-driven shotguns. So anyway, that must be a nice relationship there too, or how's that working?
It's great. I mean, Rachel and I are both partial to Italian shotguns. Like we've had Benellis, Berettas, Franchis, and they're all great. And the Franchis in particular they're definitely living up to the expectations.
That's awesome.
But I don't know. It's the hunting community has been extremely supportive. Like it's a small group of people. Like it's not that many Americans do this, and I think we all share a passion for the outdoors and the natural world and the resources and everything else, and it kind of supersedes everything else. And that's one of the most, I don't know, just like inspiring parts of it. Like I was at Pheasants Forever in February in Minneapolis, and it's like 30,000 white people, I'm not gonna lie, and like me, and I'm like, well, I'm definitely sticking out here, but like, at the same time, I never felt, excluded or kind of like, why is this guy here? Because like, as soon as anybody opened their mouth about anything, it was about how much they loved upland hunting and how much they loved their dogs and how much they love, kicking brush and getting cold and cooking on a tailgate and, shotguns and whatever it is, it's just like their passion for what they do and the memories that they've built and the lives they've built around that, like that just supersedes everything else. And politics kind of goes out the window, and it's just kind of like really encouraging being around a group of people that, that passionate.
Man, that's like a whole nother 60-minute podcast. I would love to tear into that topic. It's like, I feel like we're kind of winding to the end, but there's so much, it's so rich there. Cause like you said, I think that the passion for the outdoors supersedes any of politics or racial issues or any of that stuff. I mean, I have found coming into the hunting world, I was amazed at how friendly the scene is once they know that you aren't against what they're doing. Cause I think so many older hunters are so used to getting such like negative pushback. And when they realize you're like into it, it's like, oh, well, like, come on in, So I love that you just shared that piece. What is where are you guys headed with it? I mean, I see that you got some sponsorship. Your recipes are outrageously cool and your website's beautiful. Who, by the way, which of you guys does the photography?
Wade does the photography.
Beautiful work that you do there. So nice. So, is there a cookbook? Is there a show? Is there where's this all going for you guys, or where would you like it to go?
We're keeping it pretty open ended. We've got a bunch of projects we're working on slowly, and it's like I said, it's a passion project, and
you just must be getting a lot. Like, there must be a lot of people approaching you, though, I would imagine. I mean, or at least you certainly seem to be getting some attention.
Yeah, no, there's definitely people interested in what we're doing, and that's been great. Would love to build this, and there's a way I can make a living doing exactly what I'm doing now. That would be fantastic. Just like hunting, fishing, cooking, and taking photos and writing about it and telling, talking to people about how much I love being outside, and that'd be great. And I've started working on a cookbook a while back, and it's kind of been on the back burner. But I don't know. We're just really enjoying our time right now and just kind of rolling with the punches.
Yeah. And Wade is going to be working with the DGIF, Wade, for your hunter education program this summer. If you want to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm doing. I'm going to like a Virginia hunter skills weekend, and I'm going to be kind of like there to just kind of like answer questions and help people who have not, been involved in the hunting world and didn't come from a hunting background, and doing another program with the DGIF in Northern Virginia.
That's Department of Game and Fish. Is that what that stands for?
Yeah.
Every state's got their own different, like ours is Inland Fish and Wildlife. So it's funny how they're different in every state, right?
Yeah. So one of the most gratifying things Rachel and I have done in the last couple of years is like getting apprentice hunters out and taking them on their first hunt, and like teaching them how to set a tree stand, and like how to look for sign, and how to zero weapon and whatever. It's just like it's something that we've been doing for long enough where we just kind of take it for granted. It's like, oh, we're going to go hang a stand and check the wind and we'll be good, but it's like, this is all new to somebody who didn't grow up with it. Mm-hmm. And walking somebody through that for the first time is pretty awesome. So if that can be a part of whatever our future is, that would be fantastic too, because I feel like anybody that gets introduced to hunting from a non-traditional background of growing up and doing it, and if they like it, they're going to keep doing it, and they're going to tell their friends about it. And there's no better way, again, to I think, build more mindfulness and more just awareness of your surroundings and your impact than to actually get out there and get your hands dirty.
Yeah, you could approach life with all of these biohacking methods where you're going to try to fix this about yourself and this about yourself, or you can just kind of start with this lifestyle, and so many of those things happen already just as a byproduct, and also just going back to what you were saying earlier, you were both kind of sharing your philosophy about how you relate to nature based on what you do. And so it's if you really believe that, getting people out into the field, getting new people out is such an important part. So I love that you're part of the recruitment too. And I just want to say, at WildFed, we're really excited to get down there at some point and work with you guys and meet you in person. And if you guys are ever in the Northeast, you got a place here. So stay in touch.
That's awesome.
Thanks so much for your time today. And let's talk about anywhere you want to send people. Of course, I love the cleanness of your brand, by the way. It's at Elevated Wild on Instagram, right? And it's elevatedwild.com on the web.
Yeah,
Cool.
That's correct. Or you can email us. It's hello@elevatedwild.com.
Nice. Cool. And again, just kind of tell people what they can expect if they go to your website. What are they going to find there?
So the bulk of it is our wild game cooking. We focus on wild game, fish, and a little bit of forage stuff as well. We've got a couple how-tos on there, a little bit of adventure writing as well. We're going to be fleshing that out more as the year goes on. We try to make it user-friendly, but it's definitely some more gourmet stuff if you're looking to try something that's a little bit outside of what you normally cook. And we pull from all kinds of inspiration. We do a lot of charcuterie as well. So if you're interested in getting into wild game charcuterie, I think we're a pretty good place to start.
Cool. Yeah, I would agree. I would definitely second that. And I just, again, from the outside, I just want to say, you guys, your brand's really inspiring. The fact that you're doing it together is also a really cool part of what you guys are offering, and you just bring a really fresh take. So thanks so much, because it's really inspiring to me, and I'm just really grateful to get to share a little bit about you guys with this audience here. So thanks so much for your time.
Oh, thanks so much for having us. This was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.